You were going to perform oral sex on him for a loan.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, you are. We heard everything you said. He's an undercover police officer. He's not Coco the Clown.
Where the line between right and wrong blurs, the journey from police stings to deep cover missions, in this new series, we'll peel back the veil on the realm where officers forsake their badges for the guise of anonymity. From echoes of notorious operations to exposed corruption, silent victories of deep infiltration.
Drug agents are searching innocent people boarding flights at airports across the nation. The DEA and local police aren't making many arrests at the gate, but they are seizing a lot of money from passengers even when no drugs are found.
Cold consent encounters. You familiar with this?
I am, sir.
And tell me what cold consent is. Well, let me ask it this way. Are cold consent encounters where you just walk up to some individual and ask if you can talk to them and search their belongings?
In part, yes, sir.
And is the individual who's approaching some individual in that encounter, do your folks have on a uniform, law enforcement uniform?
They do not, sir.
But do they show their badge?
I would assume yes, sir.
And my understanding is these things happen typically at airports. Is that correct?
I would characterize as mass transportation facilities.
DEA. The DEA stands for Drug Enforcement Administration. Just in case you're not from the US and you're like, what the hell is the DEA? So, the DEA and their main focus, their main job is drug trafficking, and basically they're the ones that go after the big drug dealers. A little trip down memory lane.
Required to show a proof of driver's license.
I'm not operating a vehicle. I'm sitting in a parking lot.
Well, I'm gonna be here all day.
Okay.
Okay. So if you want to go down that route, we can go down that route.
I don't want to go down any route.
The DEA hasn't always been around, and it was actually created in 1973, which in the grand scheme of things makes it one of the newer kids on the block in terms of American law enforcement. The reason it popped up? Well, drug problems, and the government realizing that it was time for a good old war on drugs. So the DEA was born. A big part of how the DEA really came into the spotlight and gained a lot of its reputation was through its involvement in going after some of the world's most notorious drug lords. Like the one-time most richest and powerful drug lord in Colombia, Pablo Escobar, running the Medellin cartel. The DEA was famously featured in pictures of Pablo's deceased body and with huge portions of cocaine that they had seized entering the US in the 80s and 90s. The DEA played a crucial role in the efforts that dismantled his operation and ended in his ultimate downfall and death in 1993. These high-profile cases brought the DEA into the public eye and demonstrated American power in the international fight against drug trafficking. Through these efforts, the DEA gained respect, recognition, and even one of the highest bounties that Pablo Escobar ever put on a police officer's head, valued at $1 million. This was part of Escobar's broader campaign of plata o plomo, silver or lead, offering officials and law enforcement the choice between taking a bribe, plata, or facing assassination, plomo. This approach not only fueled violence in Colombia, but also made Escobar one of the DEA's most notorious adversaries. But as the DEA continued to play its key role in the international efforts to dismantle these trafficking empires, the dangers faced by DEA agents during this period underscored the high stakes of international drug enforcement and the agency's initiation into permanent examples of what Americans picture as a quintessential federal authority. So that's the DEA in a nutshell, a relatively new but now iconic part of American law enforcement.
And no, when you do these cold consent, or Mr. Horowitz, when these cold consent encounters happen, is there a warrant? Is there any kind of judge signing off when you can go up and search this person's belongings?
There is not.
There is not. So think about this. You're at the airport where there's all kinds of security. Individual walks up to you, flashes a badge and says, hey, can I talk to you and search your luggage? That's going on right now in America, Mr. Horowitz?
That was certainly going on when we did this review. My understanding is the encounters are continuing.
Say it again.
My understanding is that the program has continued.
They're still doing it.
But that's my understanding. Although
Still happening, Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
It is, sir. We still have interdiction units.
So think about this. First, Mr. Horowitz does a report on confidential informants where you've had all kinds of screw-ups, all kinds of poor record keeping, says this is a mess, tells you to put together the guidelines, you put together the guidelines, and then you won't show them to the United States Congress, the Committee of Jurisdiction. You won't show us those guidelines, and at the same time you won't show us those guidelines, you're walking up to American citizens, in this case 2 African-American women, flashing a badge at an airport, intimidating these individuals without a warrant, saying, I want to search your belongings? Really? And you wonder why we want to review the guidelines on this confidential informant in light of that? I mean, that's the concern here. So I'm glad the chairman and I'm glad the ranking member supports the chairman in getting this information to us, at least on the confidential informant. And we need to do some more on this cold consent encounters that are taking place at mass transportation areas.
So my main endeavor to cover this issue and this particular thing going on in America today is that, for one, I want my viewers and anyone who's been educated on this to be able to protect themselves in case you're ever faced with a cold consent encounter. I want Americans to know their rights. I want Americans to know that this is going on. And of course, I want other people to know this is going on in America. I also would like to bring this issue from random news articles throughout the years and a peripheral issue at a congressional hearing into the forefront. Now, there was a Congress hearing due to the Inspector General reviewing the cold consent encounters that the OIG had actually received 2 complaints about, 2 complaints from African American women. DEA in particular was asked about it during a congressional hearing that had the main point of checking both the DEA and the ATF agencies and their oversight committees concerning confidential informant use and them actually not tracking their confidential informants well enough. But as a peripheral issue, they were also asked about this OIG report and the cold consent encounters that task force groups administered by the DEA had been partaking in these and without any oversight since basically they started thinking about doing it in 2000. Well, here we are 20 years later, and finally someone's like, this is out of control and they need some type of oversight. And unfortunately, the OIG goes out there and figures out that during its review of this use of cold consent, that these encounters occur without any specific prior information about individuals being approached by the DEA. And they're used at airports, bus stations, and train stations to request consent to engage in conversation and potentially search the individual's belongings. The report raised critical civil rights concerns, particularly around the potential for these encounters to veer into racial profiling. It also goes on to illustrate much broader concerns and encounters that are obviously disproportionately affecting targeted minorities. And the DEA's task force groups, TFGs as they're called, engage in these practices and they lack comprehensive data collection. And this makes it difficult to assess. So the OIG basically comes away from this being like, hey, I have no idea how we could even have oversight for this because it's not being properly recorded. And basically, agents aren't recording whether they've had an incident unless it ends in an arrest or some type of seizure, asset forfeiture. But we'll get to that in a moment. The report detailed that from 2009 to 2013, TFGs seized $163 million in cash,
hiding in plain sight at the busiest airport in the world. Drug agents walk the concourses, blending in by dressing just like passengers. This is a DEA task force officer scanning passengers boarding a flight for Los Angeles. There's another. How do we know who they are? Because we use the same tactics to investigate them after several passengers said they were targeted for warrantless searches at the gate or on the jet bridge.
I'm a random search, guys. So he says. So those white folks? And I'm the random search.
Hollywood actor John Ellie was stopped by Clayton County officers while boarding a flight to L.A.
Were you here in Atlanta?
Yep.
How long were you here?
Doesn't matter. Why are you asking me all these silly questions? Check my bag, do what you gotta do with him so I can get out of here, please.
The narcotics officers didn't find anything, but kept asking questions of the Emmy-winning actor.
When did you purchase your ticket?
Don't worry about it, man. Just what's it called? Check my bag so I can get out of here, please.
This bag's good.
Thank you.
And it also lacked the data that prevents a clear analysis on the effectiveness or the bias, which helped these TFGs seize this $163 million from American citizens at mass transportation stations. So we end with the OIG, or the Inspector General. In fact, in this case, it was Michael Horowitz telling Congress, like, hey, the DEA has failed to ensure that these encounters are conducted appropriately, and there is no way for us to actually collect any type of data to give them oversight. So even though, they did get checked on their secret squirrel shit by Congress, I want to highlight this issue because I want it to shift from a peripheral issue in Congress to a primary topic. And I think, through lots of detailed news, journalist, and media examination and discussion from us, the citizens, we can get it into the legislative forefront, illuminate the gravity and the complexity of how unfair this is, the ineffectiveness of these cold consent searches, and hopefully we can do our part to foster some type of reform, which would align with the practices that we want from our law enforcement agents to protect our civil liberties. We need to have this rigorous debate. We need this policy reviewed. We need legislative action. And the DEA needs to rectify the concerns that have been identified in this report, which they've yet to do. And new articles come out all the time, new news stories. And in fact, one as recent as this very month came out about a man who had had his entire life savings forfeited to the DEA at an airport. No arrest, no drugs. The man was simply carrying American cash from one American state to another American state, yet he had it seized by the DEA.
What does this truck mean to your livelihood?
Everything. Without this, I can't make my money. I can't feed my family.
It wasn't a hurricane here in New Orleans' lower Ninth Ward that took his life savings. DEA agents seized his $28,000 at the airport in Columbus, Ohio.
They said we were notified that you had a lot of cash on you. I said, what is it against the law for me to travel with cash? I'm up here to purchase a truck.
At airports across the country, drug agents stop airline passengers just trying to make their flight and take their money. Our investigation found that in the vast majority of these cases, the passengers were not arrested or charged with a crime.
Records show that DEA and local police rarely find any drugs or make arrests during what they call cold consent searches at the gate. The DEA and other drug agents are seizing millions of dollars from departing passengers at Hartsfield-Jackson, mostly from flights to LA, even though it's completely legal to travel domestically with any amount of cash. We found dozens of cases in Atlanta's federal court, USA v. some amount of currency. That's right, in most cases, they don't arrest the passenger. They arrest their money, even when no drugs are found. The probable cause statements show that the cash is administratively forfeited as drug money if the passenger can't prove on the spot that their money is innocent.
You're either going to sign a consent form saying that you're allowing us to search them, okay, or I'm going to detain them, run my dog on it, and get a search warrant.
Feel free to search the bag, sir.
Are you willing to sign a consent form?
Yes, I will sign a consent form. Feel free to search my bags.
In this 2015 Department of Justice report, the Office of Inspector General told the DEA it should stop using a troubling technique, causing passengers to believe a voluntary search is a mandatory TSA secondary inspection. 8 years later, we found DEA agents at Atlanta's airport using similar methods.
We're no different than TSA, man. People just like give us a little more hard time than they do TSA.
He just approached me and he asked me for my ID.
So I figured I'd come up and talk to you.
Okay.
If you're operating a vehicle, I don't know if you know this or not, but in the state of Missouri, you are required to show a proof of driver's license.
I'm not operating a vehicle. I'm sitting in a parking lot.
Well, I'm going to be here all day.
Okay.
Okay? So if you want to go down that route, we can go down that route.
I don't want to go down any route. I'm sitting in a parking lot, and I'm shaking because I'm angry because I shouldn't be policed while I'm sitting in a parking lot doing nothing, smoking a cigarette, waiting on my friend to see if she can print out her ticket or not.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to figure out what's going on. That's all I'm doing. So
Am I free to leave? Am I free to leave and go inside of the Greyhound station then and go away from this conversation? Yeah. Thank you.
Sure you don't want to talk to me one more time?
For what? I spoke to you.
And I actually got a lot of this cold consent encounter on camera, but unfortunately, as I said no, and as I was told I was free to leave, I still had 10 DEA agents behind my car, just literally standing there after I'm like, okay, am I free to leave? The cop's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool, thanks. And I get out to go in the bus station and meet my friend, and there's still like 10, 15 agents standing around the back of my car. And I'd had my phone like live recording the incident. And for the second time in my life, my phone died while I was recording an encounter with law enforcement because I had the worst luck in the world with that. I always now try to make sure that my phone is well charged before I go. And of course, as always, I did make sure that my videos were backed up to some type of platform. In my case, I use Google Photos and Google Drive. Whenever I record a video, it instantly is uploaded into my account because otherwise, since my phone died, it basically wouldn't have saved that video had I not had that live recording going on. But of course, it does take more power to do that. And that day, luck was on the DEA side. And I didn't even realize like how pivotal that was, right? Until I see this Congress hearing and I have the most validated moment ever, like OMFNG. Congress is chewing out the DEA's ass over exactly what I found to be insane once I figured out what the hell it was, who the hell it was. Because, I mean, you know, as the cops were even at my window, as the agents are there, and I'm literally like going through it, I'm breaking out my phone and starting to record. And in my mind, like, I don't know, it didn't even hit me until like later, like, oh my God, that was the DEA. And so like my mind at the time, you know, I won't even say that I was necessarily thinking like, hey, this is like a municipal undercover unit. I don't even, like, my brain doesn't even go that far, right? Law enforcement is just law enforcement. I don't give a shit what agency you're from. You know, you're on camera, you're live, say hello. Yeah. I know you're recording it already. You'll lose that. If I ask for the film, it'll magically disappear and be gone into oblivion. But of course, in this case, it's a DEA agent. So they're not being like, yeah, I'm recording too, because in the United States, federal law enforcement does not have to wear body cams. There's no laws requiring them to do so. And therefore, a lot of the things that they're doing, and particularly these undercover task force that are initiating cold consent encounters with American citizens, are not being recorded. So I had like this magical moment, and, you know, I wish I'd have caught the entire thing, because you truly had to see the end and where my phone died at to really see the scope of how, you know, we're kind of not allowed to say no. Or, you know, as the congressman was suspicious of, as he should have been, when you say no, like, that's not the end of it, okay? And you'll still get harassed and or harangued multiple times, and still with the same bullshit questions that you've already fought off. And indeed, you know, for a lot of people, it is embarrassing. At this point in time in my life, I'm not even sure that I even felt embarrassment anymore about being like curb checked, right? I'd been drug out of my car and put on so many curbs on the side of the road so that dogs or cops could unjustifiably search my car due to bias and profiling. that I don't even think that it embarrassed me anymore, you know? Like, it still doesn't embarrass me now. It's like eventually you just, like, I don't know, throw up the deuces, like making peace signs when people were like taking pictures of you and recording you and shit. Like, look at this bitch. She must be a criminal, there's fucking 15 DEA agents behind her car. But indeed, it is embarrassing for most people. But it starts out, ironically, with me going to a Greyhound bus station in Kansas City. And this was where a good friend of mine was being released from a Kansas women's prison. So I meet her in Missouri as she's getting off the bus. And I do mean the prison bus, okay, not the Greyhound bus. So I meet her, we hang out, we're waiting on the time for her bus to be there, which was, several hours into the future. So finally, we roll back up and I'm dropping her off at the Greyhound station. Well, I tell her, text me if everything goes good and, I'm going to wait for you to get on the bus and get going on your way and before I take off. So I'm sitting outside. I was smoking a cigarette in my car. And, it was taking her quite some time. And I texted her and she said she was like still in the line inside. And the whole time, of course, I'm observing my surroundings as I always do. And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, like over and over again, I'd already pegged the 3 fucking undercovers in my eyesight. And there was a good like 50 people between like the parking lot and the parking lot of the Greyhound station. And then right in front of it was like the city metro bus that, goes around the city. And I keep looking at 2 of the individuals and then the third was like in my peripheral. And I was kind of suspicious of all 3 for several different reasons that I won't go all the way into. One of them I will hysterically note was because he was wearing a jacket with no shirt underneath it. It wasn't even cold outside. It was like fairly warm. And the dude looked like he just, I don't know, like the only criminals he had ever seen were like in the like early 2000s versions of GTA or something. I don't, he was just suspicious. Okay. And then the other 2, I keep watching the one agent, catch my gaze and I know I can feel, that he's like I have his attention for some reason. I don't know why. I'm just sitting there smoking, just looking at everyone. I'm listening to Kodak Black in my car. And and speaking of bias of the DEA, right? Like I'm pissed off that they're even like over here judging me and being all, oh, we're just trying to see if you're a good person or a bad person. Like, why the hell do you have to think I'm a bad? Like, what am I doing any different than the other 50 individuals? You guys, I literally asked him if I was like, is it because I'm listening to Kodak Black? Like, because I'm listening to rap? Is it because of my car? Is it because of my tattoos? Like, what's your deal, bro? Like, why are you over here thinking that I'm moving drugs, but the other 50 individuals in the parking lot are not? I just really didn't get it. But I guess I'm lying. If I'm being honest, yeah, I did get it. I got it. I knew, I don't know. It's always like that. Okay. It doesn't matter. Even before I got tattoos, like something about me. I guess I have that look of somebody who's up to some shit. Okay. So I'm doing that thing that you do where you doubt yourself, and I keep my guts like, yeah, he's a cop, that's a cop, and that's a cop too. And I'm doing the thing you do where you're just like, no, you're fucking paranoid and cops fuck with you all the time. So you're just, mellow freaking out. It's all good. That's not a cop. But then, as time goes by and I text her again and I'm like, hey, what's going on? She's like, still waiting. And I'm noticing in all this time, I'm like, no, I'm arguing with my gut. And I'm like, no, gut, you're totally right. Because, these guys haven't caught the bus. And there's been like multiple buses that have come by in this amount of time. But, I'm from Alabama. So I'm over here like, bitch, you don't know how the fuck the bus system even works. So like, mellow freaking out. Maybe they're just waiting on the right bus and you just don't understand how the bus system works. Wrong. Never doubt your freaking gut, man. Because it's not, a couple minutes later, here he comes. He's pulling his badge out of his shirt. I'm the DEA, blah, blah, blah. Can I see your license? Well, I'm sitting in a parking lot. I'm not driving a vehicle. So I'm not going to give you my license because, I don't have to. I'm not doing anything. I'm not operating a vehicle. I'm sitting here, and there's no reason for some Nazi-esque bullshit where you walk up and ask me basically to show you my papers. Like, you want to see my papers for what? And, I wouldn't give him my ID. So, and as I know from actually several cop friends that I have that I've now, conveyed this encounter to, and one of my friends who I actually we went to high school together and stuff. I was actually someone who referenced him for the police department. He had gotten out of the Navy, was going into the police department, and I was we were young, so he I'm one of the only people he had known for more than 10 years to even be a reference for this. So long story short, he was every time that you encounter a police officer and you refuse to give them your ID, you're instantly, my adrenaline is going through the roof. He was like, as soon as you do that, that's it for me, because I have never been trained what to do in that scenario. He's like, my entire career, I've never had anyone deny me an ID. Well, at the time, he'd only been on the force for I don't know, 6-7 years. And I'm talking to my friend who had actually retired. He actually used to be a narc, so he's gonna come up in this series a lot more than once. But he was like, yeah, never in a 20-year career, never had anyone tell him no. That just he had them tell them I don't have an ID, but not just you have no reason to see my ID. I'm not giving it to you. So he's like, instantly their adrenaline's going through the roof, et cetera, et cetera. Well, so I tell him, as you guys heard, I'm not driving. And he's like, okay, well, I'll be here all day, motherfucker. So he's like, basically this is cop language saying, I'll just pull you over when you leave then. And I go, okay. And then, he continues on and he tells me I don't have to shake. He says, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to shake. And I'm like, I was pissed. And I'm like, I'm shaking because I shouldn't be policed. And I'm pretty sure that old grandmas who have never done anything in their life shake, not just from old age, but, from police encounters, right? Because his adrenaline's through the roof, my adrenaline's through the roof. All right. So I get on the phone and I call up a ride. This ride happens to be 2 hours away. Okay. Because I've traveled to go and see my friend. And I was like, hey, I need you to come here and pick me up. And this dude was astonished. He couldn't believe that I called someone to come pick me up. But he's threatening me, right? He's threatening me. He's like, I'll just pull you over when you leave. And I don't know, I'm honestly pretty sure that it would have went completely different had I not had that camera on them. Because when I whip that camera out, it is a whole different attitude. And the agents literally, I can hear them whispering to each other. He's like, she's got a camera, she's got a camera. Back up, she's got a camera. And they're not wanting me to actually film them. Just the one cop stands at the window or the one agent stands at the window. And the rest of them are backing up away from the door, hoping that I don't catch them on the camera. But instead of just letting me go, they pile up behind the car and I'm walking through the group of them. They're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Are you sure? You don't want to just chat with us? Yada, yada, yada. Well, about this time, my friend comes out of the bus station and she's like, oh my God, they just seized all of my stuff. And they're telling me now I have to wait because they're in the middle of talking to you before I get on the bus. And I'm like, what? Why the hell would they be waiting on you to figure why? It's basically well, they want to see if they can arrest us or seize some shit from us before she can go. All right. So we walk back to my car. We both get in the car. And of course, here they come at the windows of the car. Sometime after all of this recording, my phone has died. And because it's been a whole hour or something like that, they won't let her get on the bus because, they're waiting to see, I guess, if they can arrest us for something or see something from us or whatever. So he comes back to my window and he's like, I'm going to level with you because after he's already threatened me and told me he'll pull me over when I leave and noted that I called for a ride. He goes, I'm a DEA agent. I don't even have a traffic pad. I can't write you a ticket for driving. I don't pull people over. That's not what I do. Let me level with you. We're just trying to make sure you're not a bad person, blah, blah, blah. Can I just run your name? So we go through this same scenario. I said no. So he keeps throwing other stuff at me. He's like, well, let us just let the dog search your trunk. Again, this is not my first rodeo. It will not be the first nor the last police trained canine to sniff around in the chally. Okay, so I kind of regret this in a way. I feel like I folded after such like a, I'm watching a congressman sit here and say, this is a tough position to be in. Imagine being this American, having to fight off, intimidation from a DA agent. And I did it. I did it. I did it. And then I let him search my car, or I said the canine could sniff my trunk, which I knew was going to instantly become a search, because honestly, I've never seen the canine not quote unquote hit on invisible drugs in my car. Okay, so they always hit on invisible drugs, and then the cops search and they can't find the invisible drugs because, surprise, they're invisible and don't exist. So yeah, I was kind of bummed out with myself a little bit for letting them do the sniff and hit, as I'll call it. But there was like a part of me, that wanted to like prove their bullshit wrong. Like, you were wrong, you profiled me for nothing, and you suck.